Welcome to Community Voices with your host, Terrence Lachey. This radio roundtable features community, business, and religious leaders that discuss current events and topics that impact our urban community. If you would like to be a guest or if you have a suggested topic, contact the station today at 616-259-7342. Now, into the program.
As promised, this is part two. Lee Stevens sitting in for Pastor Lachey, Community Voices on Power 91.9 WDPW. Make sure you download all the apps that you use for social media and put them in your likes and follows. Check out the website. It's all there right here on the YouTube page. And if you're listening, you know where to grab it. But we're in our part two discussion with the city manager for the city of Grand Rapids, Brother Mark Washington. Thank you for spending another 30 minutes with us. And let's get into it. Public safety, by far, just name your community around America. And that's been an issue. But as much as we tried to keep out of the headlines in a big way in 2022, we ended up in the headlines for officer-involved shooting of an unarmed individual and stuff, Mr. Loyola. I always get the name right.
Loyola. Patrick Loyola.
Patrick Loyola. Ongoing investigation has just started, so not much you can talk about, but from a broader spectrum, where is the growth now that this event has happened? Where is the growth now in public safety as it deals with the community?
Well, public, as you mentioned, public safety for law enforcement has been very challenging, even prior to the officer-involved shooting of Patrick Loyola. 2020, you recall, with George Floyd and Breonna Taylor. In that year, we saw a national outcry during the pandemic of calls for reform.
Yes.
And at that time, we had our first ever African American police chief, Eric Payne. That seemed like so long ago.
So long ago.
But that was just 2020. And he led the department through a series of reforms around use of force, around making sure that people understand the police department more transparently. He put in a strategic plan. We implemented the Office of Public Accountability and Oversight. Brandon Davis is our director of oversight, and also we've started Cure Violence here in the 3rd Ward, where we have an evidence-based approach to where non-sworn people, our partnership is with the Urban League and Cure Violence, can intervene in community and hopefully de-escalate and prevent things to occur. And these are people who have been involved in the system. Some have been incarcerated formerly and are able to better connect about their lived experiences and lessons learned, and, if you will, give a testimony as well as support as to why some of our young people in our community need to make better choices. And so we were on that path of really trying to learn what was happening in Louisville and Minneapolis and use that to improve policing in Grand Rapids, and we were partnering with NAACP, helped us with our surveillance policy, and President Jackson has been both a critic, rightfully as a member of the NAACP, but also a person who has come with solutions to help us, improve, not just this. Now we've gotten to a point in our country where people are quick to be critics, but not quick to help to construct
solution makers
and with solutions. And in the interim, we had several complaints from the Michigan Department of Civil Rights. So the department has been under a microscope for some time, and then in April of 2022, that very tragic, unfortunate morning, April the 4th, I believe the date was, where the shooting occurred in the 3rd Ward of Patrick Loyola. And the officer has since, Officer Schur, former police officer Schur, has since been terminated from the police department, but is awaiting trial, as that's part of our democracy. You have a right to a trial, and we are awaiting the outcome, and that's going to be in March. But what the police department has done since then is go back and double down on our training, our community engagement. We have gone back and said, when we train police officers, we're looking for a way where it's just not a bunch of officers in the class, but how can we get citizens in training with police officers, particularly use of force training, so that you have a citizen offering perspective on both the perception and the impact, and as well as understanding what that interaction is like. And so we've had a lot of conversations around funding for police. You have two school of thoughts. You have people who want to reduce the amount of funding in the police department and reallocate that to other community service. And then you have other people who are supporters of the police department and say, look, 2020, we had 38 homicides, the highest amount ever here in Grand Rapids. And there are still unsafe acts that occur. And it's not just the police officers' behaviors we're worried about. We're worried about people who really want to cause harm to others. And we need police protection. And so those are always challenging issues that we have to navigate through at the city. And what I have remained committed in 2022, we hired a brand new police chief, Chief Eric Winstrom.
Yes.
He hasn't even been here a year yet. And it felt like he's been here forever, given the stuff that we're going through. And he's tried to engage the community. He has an advisory group. He has a clergy advisory group, a police clergy on patrol group that works with him, that prays for the community and department, but also tries to make a bridge back to community that had been challenging because the church, the faith community, religious community, that we known of before, that we could easily go to a congregational meeting, easily go to a Wednesday night meeting because of the pandemic, was doing everything virtually.
Right.
And so we're trying to find better ways to reconnect and build trust and civilianize some of the positions that we have in the police department. We recognize that not every job requires a person in uniform to enforce, and that we want police to spend their time on high priority incidents. And so writing tickets, we're able to negotiate within the contract to have civilians now go around and write parking tickets. We don't need police officers in every instance going around enforcing parking tickets.
Right.
But when they're priority one calls, assaults and shootings, and we certainly have seen episodes of that, we need them to respond. But better yet, we need to figure out how to prevent it in the spirit of Dr. King, to make sure that we're more nonviolent.
I think prevention is the key part too. Let's be honest. Nobody in their right mind is trying to take money from the police officers. If they're used in the right way, so how those monies are used and when they are disseminated to the department is key, and also with better training and all that. And I think the city has done an exceptional job before and after the shooting. Even increased more so. It's challenging. These are different times. Listen, some of these things that I can think back to Cincinnati, the first time I ever heard of about a young man who got shot by a police officer ever was Derek Turnbull. But that was the first time I ever heard of it. But it wasn't something but to find out that it happened more times than not, especially in our years that centuries past. I didn't know about it because there wasn't a mode of broadcast. Right. It wasn't out there and stuff. But I feel like now the community's position, although pushing for reform and different services and better training and this and that, and using proper equipment in the proper sense, I think prevention is going to be the key part. And I think part of it is if the community wants to be key in on that to help the police department, because they can't be every single place. But there's eyes and ears with all these different devices that we have. If you're using them responsibly and see something, to say something. be proactive, because I'm getting almost tired of the story.
Yeah.
Oh, well, he was posting this and such on his, and I'm not talking about the case with Mr. Loyola, but in other cases where I hear somebody who is the shooter, right. Not talking about police, but just in general, the shooter, oh, well, he had a past of posting this and such on social media. By my God, just say something.
Yeah. And
you can go anonymous. There have been tools for years, decades, where people can say something and be anonymous, so you won't be you won't worry about your own safety. I think prevention, as you said, is key, and then prevention just can't always come from the police department. It has to come from our community.
It is, and gun violence in general has increased, both citizen violence, suicide, and then, of course, we've been talking about officer-involved shooting, both when the officer is the shooter, and then as well as there are cases when the officers are the victim. It has just increased. I think what is more troubling, though, for African-American community, it's disproportionately, in many cases, happening among the black community, whether it's black-on-black crime, whether it's officer-involved shooting. The cases are disproportionately in African-American community, and you're right. And since the advent of social media, and we're now more informed with the Trayvon Martins, the Mike Browns, the Tamir Rice, and then everybody started seeing, well, it's just not happening in those isolated areas. It's almost, a story in almost every city in the country. Mm-hmm. And we have to figure out why most often that people of color are disproportionately impacted by that. And we go back to, how are, the calls for the stops, traffic stop studies are poor. Is it a matter of people are being stopped because they're people of color, or is it because it's a poverty issue, financial issue, and if you're going to stop for taillights and inspections, and I'm just speaking in general, not in Grand Rapids, and other things,
right.
Is it because people of color are not able to have that kind of same maintenance, and therefore you have these lower level offenses, and then if you approach people with lower level offenses with a bias that certain things can happen, things begin to escalate. And all of a sudden a routine stop has turned into a use of force incident. And so what we have tried to focus on is de-escalation and deprioritization. I got pulled over myself. This is outside of Michigan. I went back to Texas, and I'm flying in. We're going to see my mother-in-law, and I had my wife in the car. I had my kids in the car. My two daughters with me, and I get pulled over by a local police officer in between Austin and Dallas. We stop in one of the small towns. Mm-hmm. I mean, I pull right out of the drive-through, and lights come on. And I'm like, what? Is this really the highest and best use of your time to pull somebody out because they didn't make a close turn in turner's lane, they made a wider turn? And like, if this is what policing has come to in other incidents, it doesn't take much for people to become frustrated with over policing. And so that's not what I don't want the Grand Rapids Police Department policing like that. I was embarrassed for that department, and I immediately called the police chief in that town, and I paid the fine. I didn't try to talk my way out of it. Right. But that's not what good policing should be. Particularly if it's a low level, there's no danger. Why are you pulling people over? Mm-hmm. And if I had a level of mistrust, and this is not my first time, and here I am, city manager of the second largest city, and in my life, this is not the first time I've been, I think, unnecessarily stopped by an officer. I will say, though, that is yet to be my experience in Grand Rapids. Now, for a lot of reasons, but everybody can't say that.
Right.
And so I think, though, making sure our officers are not prioritizing low-level offenses and not over-policing in communities of color is a priority of our police chief, and that we're responding to where people need protection.
We're talking to City Manager of the City of Grand Rapids, Mark Washington, on Community Voices. Lee Stevens sitting in from Pastor Lachey on Power 91.9. Last subject that I want to get into, and it just happened, was the audit. And everybody can go online to the city's website. You can go on social media and find out information about the audit. It's a lot to explain. It's very heavy work. So at your leisure, I encourage you to look at it. It's not hard to understand, but it's definitely important to look at. So the audit, as I said, is a challenge, but also presents itself, I always think, as like a bounce to new opportunities, new things to work on. So from your perspective, based on the audit, initially, where do you see one particularly great opportunity moving forward for the city, and one thing you see as a challenge that still needs a lot of work?
So the audit was for fiscal year 22. It's from July 1, 21 to 2021 to June 30th, 2022. So the audit's a look back. The budget's a look forward. So what the audit does is it makes sure it's a report card. Is the money that's being paid by taxes and fees and other revenue that's coming to the city, grants, et cetera, being spent with fidelity and integrity? Are there any problems? And the result, we had a third-party auditor from Plant Moran. We had a comptroller who was elected official independent, and a lot of financial people. Our CFO helped to work to prepare the audit. And the audit came back very favorable, clean, no material findings in terms of anything inappropriately being done. So if it were, then I'd have to answer a lot of questions on why isn't the public's money being spent according to its commission intent, vote, purpose, etc. So the audit, it also gave us good financial health picture because our bond rating is a derivative of some of our financial record keeping, and so right now we are a AA bond, which is pretty high grade, which means when we do projects, when we repair roads, or when we bond for water projects, or making sure that we invest in infrastructure in terms of water, wastewater, when we go out and borrow, it's not going to cost the taxpayers more because we have to pay a higher interest rate on these multi-million-dollar projects.
Yes.
And so the audit came back very, very favorable.
And just to give people a perspective, it's like credit score. We talk about, it's just similar. It's just same as credit score. You gotta get credit out there, or the people won't give you no money.
That's a good way to make it plain.
Right.
But go ahead. Make it plain, preacher. Make it plain. Right. Like a credit score.
Right.
And so you don't have to do any high risk loans, no payday lending. Don't do that anyway.
Yes.
And so the audit came back very favorable. And what audits, many pages, lots of numbers, but there's a citizen's guide that's on our website that breaks it down, and it educates the public on how much is being spent on different departments, and it offers a sense of financial transparency. And the reason why it's important, because there's a lot of conversation we just talked about, reallocating money.
Right.
Where do we need to invest money? And one of the things that audit reported on, and I can't remember the number right off the top of my head, but it was around tax credits, brownfield tax credit, redevelopment. Yeah. And I think the number, it's there, but it was less than $10 million. I think it was more around $4 or $5 million in tax credits that we had given over that year. But what it showed, the return on it was over hundreds of millions of dollars in investment that yielded. So people often ask, why are you giving corporate welfare? Because that's what some people who are critics of these tax programs say. So you're just giving away money to corporations. And what the credit allows is the return on investment is so much greater, and so that's also in the audit report. And without it, we are unable, and going back to the tax incentives, to continue to redevelop this community, to build jobs, to increase the tax base that provides not only for city services, but also for our public school, for GRPS.
Yes.
And you want to have people moving to your community. Otherwise, you'll see a decline. You'll just see a decline in revenue, but also potentially even enrollment in school district, which has been the case.
Yes.
Which is one of the reasons why they're disposing of some of those facilities.
Listen, I've substituted in a lot of the schools here in Grand Rapids Public Schools. Great kids, great administration and site based on the schools. So to hear investments, not just in your tax dollars that you allocate specifically to your mill for schools. There are other areas that involved in investment in your schools. So I encourage everybody to continue to do that, because there's still a lot of work to do, not just infrastructure wise, but how we teach the kids, how we have the ability to do that.
Well, and again, one of the things, this is MLK weekend coming up, and the ability to make sure that we have not just a talent pipeline, but people in our youth to continue the legacy of the future, of people who made so many sacrifices for us to have the opportunities that we have here, and who fought blood, sweat, and tears for equality. And we have to now begin. I'm getting to that point, that age, asking who are we going to who's coming behind us, who will we entrust us. This precious legacy of our community to, and I want to leave it better than I found it, and I want to make sure that we have the appropriate handoff to leave it to a generation that's coming beside us, that can come along with us and take it to the next level.
I always have this thing, it's called a power message, and the power message is both uplifting, encouraging, and thankfulness involved in it and everything. And this is your platform for, however long, but up to about 5 minutes before we need to take the other 5 to conclude part 2. And thank you once again, by all means, for sparing this hour. It's hard. It's not easy. And we don't want to take time away from our city servants because they have a busy schedule, but he just happened to have the time, and I'm appreciative of it. Power message, as I described it, it's uplifting. It empowers. It gives thankfulness and stuff. You have a staff. Mm-hmm. You have people who count on you every single day, and I know that you're grateful for that. So however long you need to describe it, but up to 5 minutes, or explain it or say it, up until 5 minutes. I'd like to give you an opportunity to give a power message to everybody in this city.
Something uplifting for 2023?
For the city employees, yes.
Oh, for the city employees. Okay.
Yes.
Well, for the city employees, and I think the community. One of the things I believe in is the collective ability of us to come together. And I was at a event yesterday, and for the retirement of Ken Fawcett, who's been a great community leader at now Corewell, but was Spectrum Health before. And he often used the analogy of a pencil. A pencil by itself, you can break it, but you put 20 pencils together, you almost have to have superhuman strength to break it. And I think when we come together, there's a kind of strength that we have together that we cannot have by ourselves. And when we come together, both government and community, when we come together interdenominationally, when we come together both police and non-police, when we come together gender-wise, men, women, as well as however someone identifies with, there's a power that allows us to be stronger together than we are separate. And particularly when we come together as a community of faith, right? Mm-hmm. Because the prayers of the righteous availeth much, where 2 or 3 are gathered, touching and agree. And I believe that there's a greater power that's in the midst. And this year in 2023, I went in on my first day at work and came into my office as I normally do, and I wrote the vision, made it plain. On my whiteboard, I wrote down, "We will make it." And I said, well, and I told myself and my staff, we will make it. And for that determination, we're going to make it. And I added on to it. So I'm not through. We will make it better. We're going to make collectively, we're going to come together as an organization, as a community, and in 2023, we're going to make it, but we're going to make it better 2023 than it was in 22. And then I said, I'm not through. I said, we're going to make it. We're going to make it better together.
Together, yes.
Yeah, I can't do it by myself. You can't do it by yourself. We can't do it just in City Hall. We have to work with community. And then I said, I'm not through. I said, we're going to make it better together despite the challenges or people who don't want us to make it.
Yeah.
And so that kind of determination and resilience is, to me, embodies, giving credence to what Dr. King talked to us as a country and community about, and a people of faith, in that old spiritual, we shall overcome.
Yes.
Yeah. And I just gave it a longer explanation. We will make it better together, despite those who don't want to see it better or don't want to help us make it better. And I believe just you inviting me here, 91.9, having me here, allows us to do something together to improve the awareness of our community, to improve the literacy, both financial, governmental literacy, and the reality is that there is no city of Grand Rapids without the people of Grand Rapids. Mm-hmm. And so I appreciate having the opportunity to take time and further connect with the residents of Grand Rapids and trying to make our community better together.
Well, I'm speaking to this camera because we got to wrap up, but I'm speaking to you, and then I'm speaking to the people as well. I appreciate you wholeheartedly. I speak faith and favor to you and the entire city, your family as well. You have done leaps and bounds work since you've been here, and I appreciate it. And not just because you're my fraternity brother, it's because you're just an incredible community leader, servant, and person altogether. And I speak that faith and favor to you, the entire city, to just continue the work, as you said. And your awareness of what's going on in your city doesn't just stop with this show, okay? I need you to make sure that anytime you want information about your city, their meetings are public. You can go there, or they're online. You can sit at the comfort of your home and watch it. Be involved in what's going on in the city of Grand Rapids. It only works better, as he says, together. And also you can keep up with us here and find out what's going on with the city, power91.9.org. Lee Stevens sitting in for Pastor Lachey, Community Voices. I hope you got a lot of value out of this. And next time that I see you, hopefully the next time that Pastor Lachey allows me to take the torch and stuff, we'll have another incredible community leader for you to talk to. In the meantime, make sure you follow us on all the socials, and make sure you support your servants of the city, just like Mr. Mark Washington, right here. Power 91.9 WDPW, the power station.
You've been listening to Community Voices with your host, Terrence Lachey. Community Voices can be heard every Friday at 12 noon. This radio roundtable features community, business, and religious leaders that discuss current events and topics that impact our urban community. If you would like to be a guest, or if you have a suggested topic, contact the station today at 616-259-7342. Until next week, let your voice be heard in the community.